What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react to some statements from the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, and basically, he's gonna explain why he turned down the US Canada trade deal. That's what many Americans do not understand right now. Why Canada ultimately decided to do that. Now, the US government is telling us that the proposed deal was very reasonable, very fair, very, very good for Canada, and that this makes no sense at all, and that it was actually Canada acting in bad faith that blew this whole thing up. So, I can't say if any of that is true or not, but that's the American side of this story. So today, I really want to check this out and hear the Canadian side of things. So let's take a look.
And while we believed earlier this week that we were moving towards a mutually beneficial agreement, in recent days, the United States proposed new terms that were uneconomic, unfair, and undermined the net benefits for Canada and called into question the reliability of any deal.
Are you kidding me right now? You gotta be joking. Oh my God. See, this is exactly why it's so important to, actually, to get your news from multiple different sources. Because this is like basically the exact opposite story of what the United States government has been telling us happened. This couldn't be more opposite. The US is totally blaming Canada and actually saying essentially the same exact thing, that Canada tried to change the terms or the demands of the trade agreement right at the deadline, right at the very end, tried to pull one over on us or something. Whereas here, when I go directly to the source, Mark Carney himself, and actually hear it for myself, he's clearly saying it was the United States that tried to change the terms of the deal at the last minute. I mean, I said this in another video that I did the other day, and it's that we've actually reached a point where if I have to either trust like Donald Trump's word, who is the president of the United States, or if I have to trust the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, who is not the leader of my country, but like, gun to my head, if you asked me like, who do you trust more to give you like the most accurate, fair, objective facts of the situation, I'd have to say Mark Carney right about now. So if this is just like a he said, she said situation, which somehow we've gotten to that point where like I can't even trust what our government is telling us happened. That's really sad. And putting that aside for a second, which is difficult because that's very disturbing to think. But putting that aside, just thinking about what Mark Carney is saying here, then that makes all the sense in the world for why Canada would not agree to this trade deal if it's not the deal that you thought you were getting. Or maybe Canada thought that you're getting like a pretty good terms, pretty good deal, whatever the concessions were going to be. and you were ready to say yes. That's what Mark Carney is kind of alluding to. He said it was going pretty good, actually, until the very end. And then at the last minute, it all fell through because the US or whoever the hell we have negotiating these trade deals. I've heard several names thrown around, like Jameson Greer or Howard Lutnick or something. Like some people, like some people that are part of the Trump administration. That if you know a little bit about them, you totally would understand why this deal ended up being a massive failure. If that's the truth of how it's all starting to make a lot of sense to me.
In short, they asked too much and they offered too little. More fundamentally,
not what you would hear here, by the way. Not. If all you did was listen to the US government, you would get a completely opposite description, which is unbelievable. So we wanted too much, offered too little. That is quite literally the most textbook case of don't take that deal. And we're not even getting into the specifics yet. We're going to get into the specifics of what exactly were these changes, what exactly were the terms of this deal that were so bad.
the cumulative effect of U.S. demands revealed the limits of their commitment to a true economic partnership.
Wow. I am dying to know the specifics because based on everything that I'm hearing here, this was like the worst deal ever. Probably just economically speaking for Canada, but also he's saying we were trying to set up some of the things so that even in the long term, it was going to be worse and worse and worse for Canada as time goes on. I don't know exactly what that entails. This sounds like a joke. It sounds like this wasn't even that hard of a decision for Canada to say no.
As I said earlier, as a result, last evening I suspended trade negotiations with the United States and directed our negotiators to return to Ottawa.
Wow. Okay. We got a lot of clips here to go through. Here's another one because Mark Carney made a press statement about this whole thing that was like 20 or 30 minutes long. You can watch the entire thing. I have a couple highlights here that I want to take a look at.
The U.S. introduced in the last hours, efforts to restrict our ability to have other trade deals. You heard me say a moment ago what we.
What? 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 We did what? I mean, I'm expecting some pretty stupid things at this point, some pretty outrageous requests. Even I was not prepared for that. We're demanding what from Canada? That you don't make any trade agreements with anyone else? Is that what he said? Is this right?
The U.S. introduced in the last hours, efforts to restrict our ability to have other trade deals.
What timeline are we living in right now? Where the United States, acting in good faith, that we had any notion that Canada would ever agree to something so outrageous. Part of the US-Canada trade deal that we wanted was demanding that Canada not have the ability to make trade deals with other countries. I don't know if I've ever heard of something so crazy.
You heard me say a moment ago what we've accomplished in the last year, 20 new deals, economic and security partnership.
Yeah.
The prospect of doubling our market access because we believe in free trade We're the partner of choice in many respects for countries around the world, and the Americans wanted to restrict that. They had.
I mean, that's no wonder Canada said no. Just based on that alone, that's insult. That's an insult. It's outrageous. What is the United States even saying by requesting such a thing? Basically, that we want to own Canada. Basically, all but in name, like Canada would still be called Canada, but we dictate the terms in which Canada can do trade with other countries? You're basically a U.S. territory at that point. What? Who came up with that? What? It, it's almost hard for me to process because it's so outrageous. And it's like you said, Canada has had such massive success in this exact endeavor, going out, creating new trade agreements and partnerships with other countries. And for the last year or more, that's all Mark Carney's been doing. It almost makes me think that the United States is mad or, dare I say, jealous of Canada, that you're going out and making deals with other countries. Why else would we demand that you not be able to do that?
Language that they wanted to restrict, unacceptable. But when it moves into restrictions and using Canada effectively as more leverage for America, clearly, Canadians wouldn't accept that.
Oh, this is a joke. This is a joke. The trade deal was a joke. If these are actually the terms that the U.S. was demanding, it became a complete joke. Who would ever agree to this?
We're a proud, independent country. We've got the right values. We'll make our decisions about who we want to trade with and how, and including on how we work with the United States. Then there's a separate issue, and I'll just stop with a sentence here, which was language which suggested restrictions in terms of our ability to execute trade deals, which would always be unacceptable to this government.
Okay. See, the fact that this isn't like front page news here in the United States is like a travesty. I feel like there's a lot of Americans who don't realize the extent of, for one thing, how criminally just antagonistic, threatening, and insulting this is towards our ally, Canada, for one thing. And just kind of piggybacking on that, the extent to which how outrageously stupid and greedy and power mongering proposing such a deal really says about us, and our government and our leadership. I feel like every American needs to know these details, because I didn't know about this. What? Because it feels like something like that the U.S. rightfully should be ashamed about. So we're just not talking about it. Unbelievable. What else?
I'm hoping you can tell us what the specific last-minute changes that the Americans proposed that made a deal untenable.
Thank you for the question. Look, I would say two things. One is there are some specifics, and I'll give you some examples, but it was also a cumulative aspect, as I mentioned in my remarks, about the willingness dans l'ensemble in total to enter into a true economic partnership.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, I understand what he's saying. Like, just generally speaking, it just sounds like this whole trade deal was an opportunity for the United States. Not even just with trade. Like, I don't blame any country for trying to like get a good deal for themselves, trying to, bolster their economy, I don't even blame anyone for trying to get a better deal than another country, to a certain extent. That's all fair play, negotiations and trade. That's how I get it. That's how it works. But this is something else. This is like the United States going way out of line with some of these demands.
But in terms of specifics, I'll give you three, and I know there's other questions. First, with respect to the auto industry, both in terms of the level of the tariffs, the treatment of Canadian content, so Canadian parts, Canadian steel, Canadian content in vehicles, the scope of the tariffs. The Americans wanted to limit it to autos only, not include medium and heavy autos and light trucks, to be more specific, not include medium and heavy duty trucks, which is a big change.
So we that's a whole other thing. It's hard to even discuss this trade deal anymore in a serious manner because it's so obvious how crazy it was. Like it's preposterous. Like this, if we throw out the most egregious, most ridiculous stuff, this was enough already to be like, this isn't really good enough for Canada. The fact that the US wanted to continue a lot of the tariffs, not exempt a lot of automotive things, and so the tariffs were still going to be in effect, maybe changed in some way, but I know that already is probably pretty disappointing to Canada.
Obviously, and with respect to Ford's new plant, for example, in Oakville, which is F-350s, 450s, 550s, they would have been excluded. GM Silverado, same thing, would have been excluded from that. No rationale, just for exclusion. So effectively moving into a series of terms that would made the production more uneconomic over time. Okay, so that's
obviously horrible.
That's a change. That restriction, that clarification, that precision was a change.
Oh, that was a change. Okay, see that there's so many aspects to this. The terms of the deal were already pretty which goes completely against the United States reporting that this was a very fair deal for Canada. That the way some of the US government officials framed this is like Canada is so stupid for not taking this deal. This is one of the best deals we've ever given out, and it's like if you actually put in a little effort and learn about the details and see the Canadian side of this negotiation, that is a total bold-faced lie. This is like one of the worst sounding deals of all time. I bet objectively, like if you ran that through AI or of all the deal, compare it to all the deals in history, it would be like, this is one of the worst deals ever. Like, right down there with like Alexander the Great taking over some country, and like Alexander the Great is like, the terms of the deal are that you're all my slaves, and I own your entire country and all of you, and get to do whatever I want, and I am your king. That's the deal. It's like that. It's like that level. That's the level of Donald Trump's deal.
The U.S. introduced in the last hours, efforts to restrict our ability to have other trade deals.
Right, okay. So we saw this bit already. Just knowing that this is stuff that the United States tried to just toss in at the last minute. What are we doing? What are we doing? It's outrageous. Like, no wonder nobody wants to. Who in their right mind after this would want to do trade with us? Why would Canada ever want to negotiate trade deals with us ever again? Out of necessity is the answer, but who would ever want to have anything to do with the US, Donald Trump, our government, our trade? When this is what we're doing at the last minute, we're like, we're just trying to pull a fast one. It's like, okay, we got the whole deal written up, and someone pulls out their rusty Sharpie marker running out of ink. Some US trade rep is like, and we also are the lords of your land. We decide all your laws, and we get all your money and your people and your and everything. It's all ours. And they just add that in right at the end, really small, and just hope you don't notice. That's basically what we're doing. It's Canada is not falling for it, I guess.
Last spring, I warned that America is trying to break us so they can own us. And I promise that that will never, ever happen.
Jeez.
We are keeping that promise. Canada is becoming stronger and less dependent on America. We are already giving ourselves more than they can take away.
There were people who thought that statement like was a little too bold when he first made this statement, like that was blowing things out of proportion. It was going too far. Mark Carney's like kind of it's all being justified now. Like this statement that he said, that's right. It's all coming to fruition now.
Last spring, I warned that America is trying to break us so they can own us.
Some people thought it was an exaggeration, but like as an American myself, based on what I'm hearing here today, this is an understatement. We're not even trying to hide it based on some of the concessions we're asking for. Not even try to hide the fact that we're trying to harm Canada. Donald Trump has openly said that he wants to own Canada. That's not a secret or anything. He's openly said that. So, real quick, I want to take a look at this document. A couple people sent me a link to this document, which is supposed to be sort of a overview, a summary of the U.S. demands in the Canada-U.S. trade negotiations. I did see at the very bottom that it says these are just reported demands. These are not confirmed by both governments, which I think it's still fair to take a look at it because there's a lot of stuff. Like at this point, we're actually living in a world where the US government and the Canadian government have totally different like reportings on the same event. So you have to go with something. But just for transparency, this document is not like 100% verified by statements by both governments. So you are trusting one government or the other here with the validity of these. But let's take a look. I assume these are pretty accurate. These are the U.S. demands. The U.S. wanted veto over strategic infrastructure partnership. Yeah. Yeah, we saw this. Canada must submit major foreign investments to a U.S.-Canada review board, giving U.S. veto power over foreign investment in Canada. It's outrageous. It's criminal. It's criminal. The United States wants the ability to control Canada, control who invests in Canada, control who Canada partners with. We want to control you. That's the craziest thing that I learned today. Number two, trade restrictions in non-U.S. nations. Canada must align with U.S. sanctions, exports, tariffs on third country nations, giving up the right to set independent foreign trade policy. It's basically more about how Canada wouldn't be able to determine its own trade policies and destiny. Jurisdiction. The U.S. demands guaranteed right of first refusal for all critical minerals. Oh, we want your resources, your minerals. I'm not shocked at all that we would want first dibs on that. That's a huge reason that Donald Trump wants to like take over Greenland is for their resources as well. Venezuela for oil and stuff. This is not the first I'm heard of the U.S. doing that. Rescinding the digital services tax. Canada must repeal legislation on this digital services tax that the US was very mad at. I think that's been rescinded already. I'm not sure. Elimination of cultural and language protections? Huh? US demands to dismantle Canadian content quotas, roll back the Online Streaming Act, exempt U.S. goods from provincial language laws, targeting Quebec's French language protections. What? So, wow. Talk about insulting. That's part of Canadian culture that you guys have French. There's French on all your products and labels, right? The United States wants the ability to not have to deal with the French aspect of Canadian products. Like if we want to sell something in Canada, like our alcohol, we don't have to put the French labeling on it. Like we don't want to deal with that. That's basically a middle finger to just a huge part of Canadian culture, right? That we just don't want to deal with. Elimination of Buy Canada? What? Canadian governments must grant American companies equal access to public infrastructure, banning preferences for Canadian or local supplier. Unbelievable. If these are all true, if this is all true, it's irredeemable. This is insanity. And I'm glad Canada did not agree to this trade deal because I don't agree with any of this. This is no way to treat our friend, ally, historical trading partner, a country that like every other country in the world really loves and gets along with. Why are we treating you like this? Why are we doing that? Like it just doesn't make any sense. It's the greediest, most power hungry, mo- like words can't even describe. Like who would come up with this stuff? The United States, American citizens should be like angry at like embarrassed. I am. This is the fact that we're doing this too. We're the ones doing this. Um Eliminating Buy Canada, absurd. Like so much of this stuff is so hypocritical too cuz here in the United States, we're all about America first. And we're but Canada can't have Buy Canada. We're all about free market, free trade. But Canada can't determine its own trade policies and partners? We're incredibly hypocritical. Dismantle agricultural safeguards, altering auto rules, pharmaceutical patent extensions. We demand extended data exclusivity for what? We want to get up in your pharmaceutical healthcare stuff, priority allocation of your energy, military mandates. That's already something we've been asking for, bugging Canada about the Arctic defense and stuff. That's kind of old news. Lowering customs, reducing the tax threshold for cross border commerce just for the American side. We really want everything. And pushing for stronger investor state dispute mechanisms, allow foreign companies to challenge Canadian laws. We just want to screw over Canada. We just want to control Canada, screw you over. This was eye-opening to say the least. I'm so glad I took some time to check this all out because like I've said, it goes completely opposite a lot of the stuff that we're being told here in the United States about Canada, and this really gave me a lot of clarity. My God, crazy. Well, it all makes sense to me now. Of course, Canada, Mark Carney didn't agree to this US Canada trade deal. This is the biggest joke of a deal I've ever seen. If even half of this stuff is accurate, this is the biggest joke ever. It's an insult what the United States tried to pull over here. So I don't know where this leaves us, what the future holds, but Canadian negotiators must be like shaking their head still now, like, what the hell did I just go through? That's how I feel. Even from the American perspective, just hearing what we demanded, it's just makes your head spin. So that's crazy. No wonder this is such a disaster. And things only seem to be escalating from here. So it's not good, but I'm glad to be aware of this. So anyway, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment, especially if you're Canadian, hearing your perspective on all this, that'd be really cool. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canadian things, from my American point of view, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.